Hi, everyone. Crista Cowan here with another episode of the Barefoot Genealogist. This is episode 3 in our series of Between the Leaves at Ancestry. If you remember, last week we had Quentin Atkinson from the Ancestry Content Acquisition team on talking all about how Ancestry discovers and then negotiates for acquisition to get the records that we can digitize. This week, I am inviting Sally Trahan on. She is from our content production team. Hi, Sally.
Hello, how are you?
So good. And I'm so thankful that you were willing to join us and talk a little bit about what you do here at Ancestry. Before we dive into all the questions from our customers, I would love to hear just a little bit about how long you've been with Ancestry, what your journey here has looked like.
Sure, yeah. So I'm the Director of Content Production Services, and I've been with Ancestry for 14 years. So it's kind of crazy. It goes really fast. And primarily, I've been here since I graduated college and have been in the imaging department. So really love imaging and work with all the teams that does all the scanning and the quality. So it's been quite a journey, and it's changed a lot in 14 years, but I love it.
It has, yeah. And so you've just kind of moved up in the ranks of our imaging department. For those of you who don't know what that means, that's just the language that we use here at Ancestry for how we take records, historical records and documents, and we create digital images out of those so that we can show them to you on the site. Now, last week we talked to Quentin about acquisition, and I know sometimes all that can be acquired are indexes, right? Like the Social Security Death Index is only an index. Or maybe there is an image, but the original record owner only wants us to publish the indexes because they want to control the images. But wherever possible, Ancestry acquires original images. And on rare occasions, like with the 1950 census, the images have already been digitized by someone else. When we acquire them, and your team does some back-end image processing, we'll talk more about that in a minute. But in most cases, digital images need to be created from a variety of different media types. And that's where your team comes in. So why don't we start there? Why don't you tell us a little bit about once Ancestry has acquired the rights to digitize and publish a set of records, what are all of the different formats of records that your team has to deal with?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is we assess kind of what media type it is, where it's located, is any conservation needed. And so we scan in our headquarters in Utah, but we're also scanning globally throughout the world. And so we scan microform, which is microfiche and microfilm. That was really popular in the 50s and 60s. And that's how they, digitized the paper. And so that is a little bit lower quality, of course, but we scan a lot of that. And then if it's original paper or volumes, we assess like what equipment do we need. And then we will set up scanners, in archives, in libraries throughout the world where they will ship them the equipment. They digitize the collection or two for us, depending on what we want. Work really closely with the archives, build relationships there. And then we get all the images ingested here in our Utah office, and we do the image processing.
So you're dealing with microfilm and microfiche, sometimes loose pieces of paper. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, we call it sheet feed or loose paper, postcards. I've seen weird stuff like slides and like little tiny postcards. We've done photographs. We've done volumes with like pictures pasted in. We've done microfiche that's actually just microfilm cut up in little strips. So anything that's out there, we will figure out a way to digitize it somehow. So,
and sometimes the media is like a bound book or a ledger, and sometimes those are pretty large, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think something that's kind of hidden is we don't just go in and be like, okay, here's a camera, let's just start scanning. A lot of prep work has to happen. Sometimes we have to hire a conservator. Sometimes we have to train our staff to take out staples and how to handle the documents. And like there's a lot of glued in inserts, or sometimes these collections, they're just falling apart and they're not stored properly, and it's just they're old. And so we take a lot of time and care to make sure that each each collection's ready to scan, and that can be very time consuming before we can actually scan it. So
yeah, so let's talk a little bit about those rates of scanning. So if something's on microfilm or microfiche, you mentioned that the image quality is a little lower because those microfilm may have been created decades ago from originals, but we can scan those and create digital images a lot faster. What's the rate for like a reel of microfilm?
So yeah, I can go over the scanning rates a little bit because we do that all the time. So for microfilm, we scan regularly, like 5 to 10,000 images per hour. We do everything images per hour. Microfiche is a little bit slower, more like 1,500 images per hour. And then paper, of course, because you're having somebody move the page and, click the shutter. So it ranges from, depending on the collection and what it looks like, 400 images per hour to 1,000 images per hour on average. So, of course, original paper is a little bit slower to scan. But
yeah. Well, and then you've got all that prep work on top of that.
Exactly. So yeah, exactly.
It's a lot. It sounds very labor intensive.
Yes, it is. And we pride ourselves on being pretty efficient, but it's a labor of love and very difficult sometimes depending on the collection. But yeah.
So when we go out and set up these scanning operations in archives, in facilities around the world, can you tell us just kind of a general idea of how much of the images that we create in-house versus how much is being created out in the field with some of these camera operators out there?
Yeah, sounds good. So we regularly process, I would say, 15 to 30 million images per month, Ancestry total.
Okay.
Scanning is actually a small portion of that, but the new images we get, it's several million per month that we're scanning out in the field. And I would say about 20 to 25% of that is done in our Utah headquarter office, where the mass majority is done in all these different archives and facilities out, throughout the world. So scanning a lot.
How many of those scanning locations does Ancestry currently have in operation around the world?
Sure. I just looked before this meeting, so I knew you'd ask that. So in the US, we have 18 scanning locations currently, and these change all the time, week to week. We'll pop a site up or another site pops down. So currently there's 18. And then in the UK, we have about 20. We're scanning a lot of parish documents out there. And then we have several in Germany, Australia, and, throughout the international realm as well. So there's a lot, and it changes all the time. So you could ask me in 2 weeks and it would actually change. So.
And I assume the opening and closing of those scanning operations is just based on whatever the contract is that Quentin's team has negotiated for a specific set of records. We're not going into an archive and scanning everything in their possession.
Correct. Yeah. Like my team comes in usually when the contract is set in stone and we have a specific collection or several collections we're doing. On many occasions, though, the archives will be like, hey, we actually found this. It's kind of cool. And then we'll add an addendum or something to the contract and add it in. But most of the time it's we're there to do a specific record set, and then we leave when that's done. So
okay, that's fantastic. So while these digital images are being created, whether in the field or here in-house, what is the process for quality control?
Yes. So we have many steps for quality control. We take it very seriously, obviously. So on the imaging side, the scanning operators, of course, do a quality check when they have the books or the documents in front of them. We want to make sure that we can capture everything at that time. When it gets to the team in the where we import it into our pipeline in Utah, we also do validations and some automated checking when it's ingested to make sure that we didn't miss anything. And then we have 2 manual quality controls. We call it imaging QA and QC, that are 2 separate operators that are manually looking at the images. And they are trained on this 120-page PowerPoint of all of our Ancestry standards of what is an acceptable image. So it's very rigorous training, and they look at it, and we do a double audit of that as well. And then,
so am I understanding you correctly? 3 different people, essentially, human eyeballs are looking at those images.
Yep.
That's amazing.
It is. And we work with partners, and most people do like a sample check, but we actually look at the images 100%. All the images are looked at and reviewed several times. So
I love that.
Yeah, and when a user pulls up an image on Ancestry, we don't want it to be upside down. We want it to be a good experience. So
yeah, I remember back in my days of scrolling microfilm endlessly at the Family History Library, every once in a while you'd come across an image where the camera operator for the microfilm creation had put their hand accidentally, on the image, and now you can't read what's. So.
I know, yeah, we call that a time travel issue, but yes, there are some things, of course, if we acquired the collection digitally where we're not actually scanning it, we can't fix some issues, but we do if we have control over the collection. So
yeah, so if we're creating the images or natively from the original documents, that quality control process sounds super rigorous, but there are occasions where if it's been created from microfilm or we've received the images digitally, we do the best we can, but there are some issues. I love that you call it a time travel issue. We can't go back in time to the 1950s and fix that reel of microfilm.
Take your hand. Yeah, exactly. Right. And I always tell my team, it's kind of it's not always the case, but if it's a grayscale image, it's probably from microfilm or microform at some point. If it's in color on our site, it's probably from original. So there's a little trick for you.
Well, okay, so this brings up a really great point, right? So we're scanning images in black and white, which you said is typically going to be grayscale from microfilm, but we also have full color images on our site when we have created that image natively. I imagine the image sizes vary greatly. So we have how many images on the site, and then how much storage does it take for all those images?
Yeah, it's a lot. So currently, I think on our website, when we looked back in July, it was over 2.5 billion. And that I believe that excludes user-generated uploaded images. So if you add that in, it's actually 4 billion. Just what we put on the site was 2.5. So we do compress our site images a little bit, so they're smaller than the ones we deliver back to an archive or the ones that we archive ourselves. But it's many, many petabytes of data. And then I don't have the exact number for the site images, but for our archive copies, which we do store that for Ancestry, the archive, if we ever need to reaccess the images. When we checked a couple years ago, it was over 16 petabytes of data. It's a lot, and it gets added to every year. So I know my brain can't even comprehend that amount.
And did you say 2.8 billion images?
A little over 2.5 billion.
2.5 billion images. Wow.
Yeah, I was trying to do the math on my phone. It doesn't even go into the billions. I was stuck in the millions. So it's a lot.
That's amazing. And then remind me again how many we're doing per month.
So I looked in 2021 and we did 17 million per month in 2021.
So that number just keeps growing.
Yeah, and it really depends on what we're working on. I've seen that spike to 70 million was our peak, and sometimes it's 10 million. So it really depends on the collections we're processing and
wow. That's amazing. Okay, well, I know because you've been here for so long, you have probably seen some crazy things. You've probably had some crazy things reported to you from your operators out in the field. Maybe do you have one or two favorite crazy experience stories?
Sure. It's hard to choose probably, but I think one thing that's always shocking to me is I'm not out in the field scanning with my team members that are doing that, but they get to deal with some really fun stuff, I will say, just documents just that are really poor quality. I think we were scanning some, they're dealing with mouse droppings or things that are stored that are just disintegrating over time. In the Utah office, we scanned some old French books that were super cool, but they had mold on them. So we had to be really careful and had to wear masks and wash hands and stuff like that. So I think we kind of like that stuff. It's just fun to talk about, I guess. But it's rewarding. Then you can digitize it and preserve it forever, where it's really just, it doesn't last. That's for sure. We were scanning in Texas last year, and we were almost to the end of the project, 90% done. And there was an electrical fire in a cubicle there. Luckily, the collections we were scanning had been moved at the time, but they lost a lot of their content. So this preservation that we're doing it's very meaningful, and it needs to be done. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because we think so often about our customers and about what we're
Mhm.
delivering to them. We're delivering these historical discoveries to them, but those historical discoveries are limited by what records exist.
Mhm.
And every day, records are lost.
Yes.
Natural disasters, man-made disasters, archives that just don't have funding and toss records. I
Mhm.
understand you guys went dumpster diving once.
Oh yeah, that was what I was going to mention too. Yeah, so we found some probate and wills. There were these huge books, like 6 inches. They were huge. Like they were in a dumpster, and one of my team members literally rescued them, and we scanned them, and they're on the site now. So
Wow.
it was pretty
So,
cool.
so
Sounds
yeah,
great.
the subscriptions that our customers pay are helping to fund in large portion this work that you and your team are doing so passionately and so well. So thank you, Sally, for answering all of our questions.
I could
This
talk
is
about imaging forever. So yeah, not a problem. Happy to be here.
I love it. So I am going to ask you one last kind of surprise question that I'm asking all of my guests, and that is just what is your favorite thing about working at Ancestry?
Oh, okay. I get asked this a lot in interviews, actually, when we're interviewing people. But it's two things for me. It's the people we work with, because it honestly feels like a family. Like,
Yeah.
even if you don't know everybody, we all have a common goal, and we kind of geek out over genealogy and history and equipment. So it's not a job. It's very rewarding, and working with these people, we do really hard things, but we love it. So that's one thing. And then the product we have is just so unique. Like, it's hard not to mention that. Like, basically, we're making images that you pull up. It's like the only signature maybe you've seen of your grandparents or your great grandparents, or you can see their handwriting. Like, an image can change your world and make you cry. So it's really exciting, just the product that we put out there. So I would say both of those things in tandem are my favorite thing of working here. So
I love that. Thank you. You made me tear up just a little bit because I am right there with you.
yes, we
Well,
feel it in our blood, that's for sure.
thank you so much for joining me today, Sally.
Thanks, Crista.
Okay, well, that was all about how digital images are created here at Ancestry. This is part 3 in a series that I think may have 10 episodes, but we'll see, especially if you have more questions about what goes on behind the scenes here at Ancestry. Please feel free to put them in the comments here on the YouTube video. I do scour those and am assigning them to the appropriate guests that I'll be inviting on every other week. On Tuesday, we'll have a new episode. The next episode, 2 weeks from today, we'll be talking about the next step in the process. So Quentin's team acquires things, Sally's team creates the digital images, and then we have to take those digital images and index or key the information off of them in order to make that information searchable and hintable for you on the site. So we'll be talking to a team member who works on that. Until next time, I'm Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.